Hello, everyone. Welcome to the June 2013 Professor Messer A+ Study Group. I had to think about it for a moment because for those of you following us, I haven't done one of these in a number of months. You may be asking yourself, what in the world is going on? Where did he go? He was here a moment ago and then he went away. Well, we're back now. I have some things to share with you about what has been going on in this very chaotic office of mine, the studio that we have going, but there's some great things that have been happening and even some great things that we've got planned. So a lot of nice things that are coming in the future. And I think some nice things that we're going to do today. We've got a lot that we're going to go through today. Being gone for a few months means that there are a lot of questions out there that people have about all of the different things happening with the CompTIA A+ exam. So before we get into this, let me explain that what I do is I send out messages to everyone and say, I'm doing a study group. Send me your questions. And if you registered for the study group, you got some of those questions. You saw all of those things that were coming through with the questions. So that was good. You were at least able to send me notes, and I got plenty of questions, so not a problem there to be able to do that piece. I am, while we're in here now live, you're not only able to see the stream, but if you are on professormesser.com/live, which is where we do this every month, there is a live A+ study group chat room, and I'm watching your messages go by right in front of me. So even if you didn't get a question to me prior to this study group starting, stick a question in there, and I'll try to catch those as we go. We'll stop and scroll back through a few of those and see if we can also address those as well. There is a lot of things happening. The first thing is that I can announce that my 220-801 and 220-802 courses are now complete. So I went away, but I was very busy. So you can now go to the Professor Messer website and see every single one of my A+ videos, the entire course for both exams, absolutely free, every minute of it. If you are someone who needs this offline, you are traveling, you're on a plane, you just don't have great bandwidth, I do have offline versions of those available to you as well. Unfortunately, I can't make them available for free, but you're welcome to have a look at what's offered there. I also provide MP3s and the PDF files of the slides. You can find those at professormesser.com/download-A+. And of course, probably the best thing you could do is just watch them. Whether you buy them, whether you watch them for free, I don't care. Just watch them. And you can, of course, keep track of that at professormesser.com/YouTube. If you were to subscribe to my channel, it's amazing what that is able to do for the visibility on YouTube. I think that's one of the reasons we're able to do some of these live streams for free. And I can, of course, have my daily A+ pop quiz that I put on Twitter and YouTube. You can find that at professormesser.com/Twitter and professormesser.com/Facebook. And I don't really put it on YouTube, so the YouTube piece will just have to be these types of events that we get together and do those things. Well, if you were here last time, we did quite a bit. Now, this is, I think, March was the last one we did, but we talked about once you find the result of Event Viewer, how can I show this to you without my big head in the way? There we go. Once you find the result of Event Viewer, how do you resolve the problem? We also discussed how common are Windows boot errors, what causes them, is there a way to prevent them? We talked about the difference between a default gateway and a router. We discussed things like SATA. What in the world is SATA and how does it work and what are the specifics around it? And we wanted, some people were asking how in-depth they should be studying for A+, and is it necessary to know things like CPU sockets for the exams? Now, that was in our March edition. So if you were to go back and watch the March study group, all of these questions are answered. And I mentioned this because every time I do a study group, I get a lot of similar questions. So you may be able to find things you were looking for in the previous month because these topics will not be ones that I do this month. So that's pretty important to consider having that particular view of the world. I think that's one of the ways that we're able to build these because I just make them available. You can go back to any of them and be able to do that. So I think that's a useful thing as well. If you already have your A+ certification and you want to get continuing education units from this, you can do exactly that by going to certification.comptia.org/CEUFAQ and reading all about that. I think that's one of the things that helps a lot of people with being able to continue on and keep their A+ certification current, because as you know, after 3 years, it expires unless you renew it. And this is one way people use to renew it, is watching seminars and webinars and events like this and getting credit for that piece. I think that's extremely useful as well. Some people don't use that continuing education units. We talked about this a couple of study groups ago. Some people prefer taking a higher level exam to automatically renew their lower level exams. And you can also find out more about that at that same link, certification.comptia.org/CEUFAQ. So there is a lot going on. As I mentioned, my 801 and 802 course is completely done. And if you've been following for a while with my courses, you know that I make these videos available for free. But one of the things that's a little bit different this time is that the videos themselves, I've added some things. So if I go on, let's have a look at my website. So if you're on my website, boy, there's a lot of people in the chat hanging out. Let's see if we can get rid of some of this information on the screen. I'll just scroll up on some of those pieces. So if you're on my website and looking at those videos, let's just go to the first video that I have here, how to install BIOS upgrades. One of the things that's different is you'll notice, yes, there you have the video that's on the page that you could watch. But another thing is right underneath the video, you have the entire transcript of the video. I have had these very nice people that I have contracted with that have gone through every single video. They take every bit of text, and there it is on the screen. So some of you have even asked, can I buy the transcript? Nope, can't buy it. It's for free. You just go to the website and it's all right there ready for you. So I think those types of things can come in handy. Very, very handy if you're trying to follow along. Now, along with that, if you were to play the video, and I'm going to turn off my, well, maybe we'll keep the audio on. I'll just turn it down a bit, and you turn closed captioning on.
The firmware
on YouTube.
is the software that's inside of your computer that gets everything going.
So if we go here and I'll turn on
sitting there inside
captions.
of the hardware to tell all of the other devices what to do when you
So
apply
you'll
power to
get
the system. How does the operating
the transcript there, as or the closed captioning built into this. And in YouTube, you can change. Notice this is white on white. You can change how YouTube shows your closed captioning so that there's settings that you can go to say, no, I want my background to be black like that. That looks better. So now you can follow along. So if English isn't your first language, or you're trying to figure out what in the world did he just say, you can go and get that constant view that's there. Another thing that we've done is you'll notice that right underneath the videos, at least for the first 5 videos or so, I'm busy, I'm working on this, is a set of review questions. One of the things that people talked about is in my older videos, there were questions at the end, but I wanted to provide not just summary questions at the end, but maybe even give you more of an experience of what you might expect in an exam, or at least get you accustomed to answering multiple choice questions. So I have this great software when you click start that gives you a series of questions. In this case, there are 3 questions to complete. So you can step through the questions and see how you do. Which of these would be a good best practice before performing a BIOS upgrade? So these questions go directly back to the video that you're watching. They're here to help reinforce what you've learned in the video. I write these questions. I don't design these questions to be specific to a test or just like the exam. I'm really designing the questions to help get across the main concepts of the video to see how you did. So let's try one. Which of these would be a good best practice? Perform a disk defrag, install, enable antivirus, install latest Windows security updates, connect to a reliable power source. I think for a BIOS upgrade, we will choose D, connect to a reliable power source. And it says, yes, that's exactly correct. And here's the explanation associated with that. Good, let's go to another one. How often would you commonly update a system BIOS? I say with the monthly security updates. So I'm intentionally choosing one that's wrong. So you'll see when it's wrong, you'll get feedback about what is wrong. And when you finally hit the right one, you'll get an explanation about what is right. And then for question 3, you can see the piece here. And once you're done with the question and you finally get the right answer, you'll see at the bottom how many were completed and how well you did from a score. Now, these will, the questions don't change every time, but the order of the answers does change. Actually, the order of the questions changes. Just I only have 3 questions per video. And I can, of course, add more later. That's one advantage of doing it this way. So hopefully that will be something that everybody will be able to take advantage of and use some of those. I think I think having that capability is something that is useful. You get that feedback about what's going on. So look for more review questions. I'm in the process of writing all of these review questions right now. And as it says here, I'm going as fast as I can. So I'm going through them. I'm adding more questions. A lot of these questions I have done previously in pop quizzes. So I'm grabbing some of my old pop quizzes. I'm putting those into the sample questions and fixing them up so that they are more like something that might be a test question. I take out kind of the joke answers because everything's scrambled. If you take my daily pop quiz, there's always an option E that for some reason is never correct. Well, I take out the option E on these study group questions or these summary questions, these video review questions. So you don't have to worry that you're being tricked. I hate trick questions, and the A+ exam doesn't give you trick questions. So I try to get you into that mode of looking for the right thing and getting rid of the wrong things inside of that piece. Now, if you have joined us before, you know that we have interactive views of this as well. If you have a mobile device that has a QR code reader, you might want to get that handy, because one of the things I like to do is ask you questions throughout the study group. And I put up a QR code, even if you don't have a QR code reader. And maybe we've hit the peak of QR codes. Are we doing QR codes anymore? I have to keep asking. Is that something we're really doing? I'm not sure. Sometimes I see them used a lot, sometimes not. I thought this was a pretty good use because it's right here on your screen. You might be watching on your laptop or your desktop. You can grab your mobile device, grab this, take a view of the screen there and get that QR code, or you can just type in vot.rs. That takes you right to the website. Pop open a new tab or a new window, go to vot.rs and use the number 975187, and you can go to and view the question and answer it. So I want your feedback. I want to know from you what you are doing with your A+. How long have you been working on this? What types of things are most important for you? These also help me decide what content to put on the study groups. So I think that's also useful as well, so I can get some feedback from you on what you might want to see on the study group. So I'm going to have some votes are already starting to come in with that piece. You go to vot.rs and you choose the number 975187. A lot of numbers there. They used to be much shorter. This is a very popular service that I'm using to compile these things. And what you'll see is when we start compiling those is a view like this. So I get to see at the bottom, you can see exactly how many respondents we're getting right in here. So far, it's counting up. So I want to know your view of the world, what you happen to be seeing, the things that are important for you. And so we got 22 respondents. There's no right or wrong answer. So that's an important thing to consider. I'm going to ask you some interesting questions later on in the study group. So you're not supposed to put the answer in the chat. So let's see how we do here. If we show the result, we can see that we've had most people somewhere between less than a month or 3 to 6 months. 5 of you have been doing this for less than a month. So you're just getting into it. Hopefully some of the questions I have at the end of today's study group are going to help you a lot about what should I be studying. This is a lot of stuff. This is almost overwhelming. What do I do? I have answers for you today. A lot of us are the 1 to 3, 3 to 6 months. But there's a little dip. This happens every time, a little dip. And then there's some of us that have come back to it. If you're like me, there's life that seems to happen all around your head. So you can start to see that some of us have maybe started this, then we came back to it. I got a number of those questions here as well. So that's pretty nice. Now, I'm going to quickly, while we're voting, some of you in the chat room are talking about the video review quizzes. You like them? That's great. Some of you are saying, I don't see a video review quiz. Well, I've got the first 5 videos. Remember, I have 170 videos that I have to put review questions on. So I'm just now starting that process. So if you go to the first 5 videos, you'll see them. And eventually, if you're watching this video as a replay, there will certainly be more that I'm adding into that mix. So this is great. We've got a nice mix of people that can really look at this as something they've been doing really in the less than a month all the way up to 6 months. But I assure you there's content here that's going to help everywhere for all of you too. So we'll be able to see all of those pieces and get a view of that particular world. So let's move on now to some of the questions that you asked of me in this exam update, that some of the things that we are working on those pieces. The exam itself has a lot of content associated with it. So make sure that as we go through and these questions, I try to get as many as we can, but with hundreds of questions that come in every month, there's only so much we're able to do. One thing I will mention, and this is an important consideration for those of you that are ready to take your A+ certification, especially those that are just starting the A+ certification. There are 2 exams that you would be able to take right now. One of the exams is the older 700 series. The latest exam is the 800 series. The 800 series has been out for over 6 months now. It's one that is really the main one, but there is a time when CompTIA introduces a new exam that they begin to phase out the old, and there's an overlap period. We are still in the overlap period here on June the 29th of 2013. This A+ 800 series will be the only series available after August 31st. Now, that's an important consideration. If you're thinking, I'm going to take the 700 series, remember the 700 series is gone after August 31st. You have to pass both your 701 and your 702 in 2 months. And you have to make sure that you get that done. If you pass one and you don't pass the other, you've got to start over with the 800 series. So this is an important consideration. I almost require you at this point to go to the 800 series. Otherwise, you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself to get this done. The 700 series, though, doesn't have what we call performance-based questions. I'm going to talk more about those today. There is also a lot older technology. This is really an exam that is now about 4 years old. Back then, we still had people using Windows 2000. Now it's really, really, really hard to find somebody who still has a Windows 2000 desktop. So Windows 2000's on the 700 series exam. You have to memorize that information that ultimately you may not ever use ever again. The 800 series, much more modern, much more detail about that piece. You can see the latest technology is on the 800 series, so make sure that you look at both exams to understand exactly what those options might be. Now, the 800 series exam has a lot of information on it. You can see the 801 exam has PC hardware, networking, laptops, printers, and operational procedures. The 802 has operating systems, security, mobile devices, and troubleshooting. This is also a very different format than the 700 series. So if I get tons of questions every month. What's the difference between these two? One major difference between the 700 and the 800 is that the format's completely different. We used to call the 700 series, or we still do call the 700 series, we have the essentials and the practical application. And there was a little bit of an overlap between the two. Look at this screen. There's no overlap here. Networking is in one of them. Security is in the other one. Laptops is in one. Mobile devices is in the other. Hardware, all in the first one. Operating systems, all in the second one. It is very well laid out. In fact, I like this format a lot better because you can really focus on specific topics, learn those as well as you can, and go take the exam. Then you can shift your view onto completely different topics for the next exam that you want to take. So think about that as you're going through and deciding which one of these exams do I take. Notice the difference is the maximum of 90 questions now, not 100 questions on these exams. And the passing score is very similar to the passing scores. Notice the passing scores aren't percentages. They are a passing score, for instance, 675 on a scale of 900. What is that? I don't know. I don't work for CompTIA. I'm not part of CompTIA. I don't really talk to CompTIA, but I think the idea behind this, what we think happens is that every question is worth a different number of points. So whenever you answer a question, it goes towards up to a total of 900. So hopefully you'll get enough questions right that I guess are hard enough that will give you enough points to get to that 675 or to get to that 700. So that's why I can't tell you also what percentage should you get right. you're never even quite sure. Even if you calculated 675 divided by 900 based on 90 questions, except it's a maximum of 90 questions, you may get fewer than 90 questions. You really can't do percentages. So there's a challenge there with being able to figure that out. Yeah, it's very much like an SAT or some type of college level entrance exam. Where the scoring is not a percentage, and that way they're able to weight the questions to really help you. If you answer a question that was really hard, you should get more credit for that. If you answer a question that was really, really, really easy, maybe we shouldn't give you so much credit for that one, but you should get a little bit. So some nice things there. And I'm going to be talking all about not just the multiple choice question today, but also a lot of the practical exam questions as well, and give you a feel for that too. Let's go now into the questions that you guys sent to me this month. Let's get to some real content, but I want to ask you a question first. Which of these would be an advantage of using an SSD over an HDD? So no answering in the chat room. Do not answer this in the chat room, but you can go to vot.rs and the number is 586232, or you can take your QR code reader, snapshot that one. And I have some answers for you. So which of these would be an advantage of using an SSD over an HDD? I guess you have to know what those things are first. One is a better capacity to cost ratio. One is faster response times. Maybe it's better device compatibility. Perhaps it's a smaller mobile footprint, or maybe it makes your files more shiny. I don't know if that one sounds legitimate. That one doesn't sound quite right to me. So which of these would be an advantage of using an SSD over an HDD? So your first step here is obviously going to be figuring out what's an SDD? What's an SSD? What's an HDD? What are these things? That really is your challenge of trying to figure out the questions in the CompTIA exam as well, because they will give you abbreviations and assume you know what the abbreviations are. And then you have to be able to answer the question knowing what those abbreviations are. And they'll put in questions that don't match the abbreviation just to throw you off. Those aren't trick questions. They're really trying to see if you know what those acronyms are. And if you look at your CompTIA exam requirements, the whole last number of pages of those exam requirements is nothing but acronyms. So it becomes very useful to have those acronyms there as well. And so we've got some respondents here. Which of these would be an advantage of using an SSD over an HDD? I think get your answers in, and I'm going to hit the button to see what the answers are. Again, no answering in the chat room, please. And I didn't fool anyone with this. I think this is probably one of the hotter technologies right now, so it's top of mind for most of us. But there, you already know something that you need to know for your CompTIA exam, which is some significant advantages of SSD over hard drives. Pretty important to have that piece there. Okay, two of you chose make your files more shiny. I can almost pick out exactly who that might have been in the chat room. One of you said better capacity to cost ratio, and not actually true, and I'm going to tell you why that is the case. Smaller mobile footprint, interestingly enough, not so much. The footprint of an SSD, the actual piece that you would put in your mobile device, is actually the same size as a hard drive. There are some that are smaller, to be fair. There's some flash drives that are custom made to fit into smaller places. But if you put a hard drive for a laptop next to an SSD for a laptop, it's the same exact footprint. And it's designed that way so you can simply slide them in and it fits perfectly and it has the same mounting connections. It's an easy replacement. That's one of the best things you can do to upgrade your device, is to move from a hard drive to an SSD. Because the question came in this month that said, would you rather have the speed but the loss of space, because SSDs don't have as much storage space on them, generally speaking, as a traditional hard drive, or would you take the massive space at a loss of that access speed, that read-write speed that you have with an SSD? It's hard to answer this question in a vacuum. If you've never used an SSD, you're like, I don't know, I'll just get which one's cheaper. But adding an SSD into a computer is amazing. It is life-changing. You start your machine and instantly things are happening. And this question suddenly becomes a lot more interesting when you start comparing what you want to do on your computer and the advantages of having that SSD in place. But there are some misconceptions about SSDs and how they operate. Let's step through these technologies to get a feel for why are these so different. Let's look at a hard drive. If you were to take the screws off the top case of your hard drive and open it up, this is what it would look like. Don't do this. Don't do that unless you don't want your hard drive anymore. If your hard drive's not important to you, then you can open it up. If it's broken, this one was broken. This is one of my drives. You can see me. Actually, if you look closely at the picture, you can see my hands around the camera taking a picture of the very shiny platter that's on there. So the hard disk drive itself has this ability or this requirement to keep dust out, because you have these hard drive device that has all of these different pieces on it. You've got this platter that's spinning around at very high rates of speed, because it has to be able to put the data sort of like like a record player. All right, so there you go, another type of reference that nobody's going to get out there. A few of you will, but it's spinning around on this spindle. And that's how the data eventually makes it over to this arm that is on here that's connected to this actuator. So this arm moves back and forth across this particular spinning device. Seems so archaic now when we think about it, but it's such a viable storage mechanism, a viable storage medium to be able to use. So incredibly useful. And up to a few years ago, this was really our primary method of storing these devices. This has some incredibly powerful magnets inside this actuator. If you were to take off this actuator, you'd have to get exactly the right hex screwdriver there, take off the actuator, and right out of there. It has incredibly strong magnets. Don't get that anywhere near anything that's important to you. It will erase all of your flash drives pretty darn quick if that's something important to you. There's this head that moves back and forth. It's reading the data. So the reason these things spin so fast is you have to be able to read this data as it's going by. And if you miss it, you have to wait until it comes by again. And although some of these drives, the high-end ones, are spinning at 15,000 revolutions per minute, they're really spinning fast. Unfortunately, there's still time that goes by as you're waiting for this to come through. And once it finally gets there, it takes time to read the data. So this is a mechanical device that's storing this data, and we have to mechanically take the data off of this device. There are some challenges there with being able to access data in a timely manner, especially when you compare it to a solid state drive, an SSD. It's solid state. The state is solid. Nothing is moving other than the electrical signals going back and forth. There's no mechanical pieces involved here. It's simply flash memory. So you're writing to memory and reading to memory. Reading to memory and writing to memory, that's incredibly fast when you compare it to something like a mechanical hard drive that has a spinning head and has these arms moving back and forth. So if you start looking and comparing these things and what their value is, let's have a look at them. Let's take the difference between a solid state drive and a hard disk drive, an SSD and an HDD. If we look at the power, because the solid state drive doesn't have a motor, we're not spinning something, it has about maybe half, sometimes a little bit better power draw. Uses 2 to 3 watts instead of 6 to 7 watts. Now, if you're on a desktop device like I am, the devices that I'm using here, the one in front of me, all SSD. Got a 512 megabyte SSD, and I do video. So that's not a lot of disk space for me. Not a lot of, I say disks, we're so used to saying that, a lot of storage space for me. But it does have such fast response time that I'm able to edit videos so quickly, but I don't have to worry about power draw here. I'm plugged into a wall. I'm plugged into this configuration on the wall, and I don't have to worry about power so much. I'm of course interested in using as little power as possible, but you can see if you are on a laptop, that may be a concern for you. Another is the cost. Look at the differences in the price. Currently, and I took these numbers last night, I just went to Amazon. I grabbed a Western Digital 3 terabyte drive. I grabbed, I think, a Crucial 240 or a 512 gig SSD, and I just did some quick calculations. 80 cents per gigabyte is how much I would pay to have that storage on a solid state drive. Look at the difference for hard drives. 4 cents per gigabyte. Clearly cost effective wise, this spinning media has some significant advantages, much less expensive than the SSDs and what they're doing. Capacity-wise, we've already just mentioned a good example of that. Kind of the best economical price point wise, about a 512 megabyte reasonable capacity, or should be gigabyte. Look at that. I didn't even write that down properly. See, now we're going to edit on the fly, everyone. Look at this. Let's change it. There. Now it's better. Don't send your emails. Don't send your letters. Don't send your tweets. We're all better now. So thanks. So now 512 gig versus 3 terabytes. So economically, there are bigger SSDs, but the price goes way up after 512. I think that's probably a pretty good spot right now in June 2013. That's a pretty good price point that you would find for an SSD. Hard drives, you get 3 terabytes, 4 terabytes. You can get a lot more storage in your system. Vibration-wise, obviously, solid state has none. If you have a very large array of drives, one of your problems when you mount those in a data center is all those drives start spinning at the same time. The arms are going different places on the different drives. They shake. And as these drives, these hard drives shake, it becomes more difficult for that little arm that's inside of there to properly read exactly what it needs to read, because the data is on this tiny little track that's going by and it has to be able to get it. And if it's shaking, that doesn't work very well. You also have the head hitting the platters, which is a serious problem. You don't want that. The head is normally just floating on the air that is created by the platter spinning. Amazing technology. It's really amazing it works at all. To be able to do that. So you'll notice on some of these very large drive arrays, there's mounting on the front, there's mounting on the back, sometimes there's mounting in the middle to try to get those drives to stay as still as possible. And you don't want to put them at the top of the rack, you want to put them at the bottom of the rack. All these little things, who would have thought going through those? So in the chat room, somebody brought this up, and it was perfect timing for me, which is I thought SSDs, they have a horrible failure rate. And if you go back 8 years, the early versions of flash drives and the SSDs, there was only a certain number of writes that you could do to these flash drives before they are no longer able to write anything. So those days are long over. We haven't had those types of SSDs in a very long time. Now you could sit there and write to this drive, and it would be well over 100 years until if you were writing to that disk every day, 24 hours a day, more than 100 years before you ever even got to a point. Actually, it's probably much more than that. I'm trying to remember the stat off the top of my head. But the failure rate, you can see 2 million hours is the mean time between failures for something like an SSD. And you've got the 1.5 million hours for something like a hard drive, because they're moving parts. And moving parts tend to break down a lot faster than parts that don't move. So as you're looking at options for SSD or HDD, if you're looking for solid state versus hard drive, you've got some options available to you, things you should think about when working with those things. But I find that for what I do or the decisions I make, it tends to be more of, what do I want to do with it? If all I'm interested in doing is checking some email and browsing, maybe I'm fine. But if I'm doing gaming, if I'm doing something like, if I'm doing video editing, if I'm working with any type of application that has a lot of disk input and disk output, SSDs may be a better way to go. And if you have a laptop, just get an SSD. Laptops, you're moving them all the time. I mentioned the hard drive inside and that head bouncing around. And we really abuse our laptops. Don't put a hard drive in a laptop. These days, it's an SSD. That's exactly what you should be putting in a laptop. That way you can pick up your laptop, move it across the room, and you don't have to worry about the hard drive crashing. So most people don't worry about that anyway. They didn't realize they were putting their data at risk every time they picked up their laptop that had a hard drive inside of it and moved it across the room. Significant issues with that. So be very careful about that piece. And the speeds, amazing differences in speeds. Hard drives 50 to 120 megabytes per second, depending on what type of hard drive and what type of interface you have. Look at the differences in throughput on an SSD, 200 to 500 megabytes. Just an enormous difference. And it is remarkable. If you've never worked with an SSD before, and people have even said that in the chat room as I'm watching live, they said, "Oh, I'll never go back. I'll never go back to that hard drive. It's so fast." In fact, someone who has an SSD, Ryan, saying, "Yeah, my brother had a new laptop, had a hard drive in it, so slow. It's like working with molasses when you go back to a hard drive." And it's so true. If you're looking to make one significant upgrade to your computer, an SSD may be the way to go, just because of all of those advantages associated with it. Just huge differences there. Well, I got more questions for you, and this one deals with, since we're on the topic of hard drives, let's deal with hard drives. Don't answer in the chat room. Do not answer in the chat room, but I want to know what RAID type duplicates every single bit of information across multiple physical disks. You can take a snapshot of this with your QR code reader, or you can go to vot.rs and choose 696826. That's vot.rs using 696826. And those in the chat room are trying to bait me into a Windows versus Mac conversation. We won't be having it. We won't be having it. I say Linux is better than anything. How about that? Whoa, no Mac is. No Windows 8.1 is. See, that'll keep you going for a while. In the meantime, go out to vot.rs to 696826 and vote on which RAID type does duplicate all information across multiple physical disks. And I'm asking really an exact duplicate. I'm not saying that it just spreads it out. I'm saying it duplicates it exactly. If I was to look at one disk and look at another physical disk, the information would be exactly the same between those two disks. There is a RAID format that does that. Which RAID format provides that capability? The responses are coming in. I'm going to take a sip of water here while I put up the view. There we go. Okay. See, I've already started a flame war in the chat room. Let's see, with 38 respondents, 40 in, we'll let a couple more come in here. 45, you're voting now. Yeah, DOS rules. There we go. We've now solved the operating system war. It all goes back to CP/M. Let's see what people's answers are. Oh, so we mixed some things up this time, and it may have been my bad writing of this particular. You can't see it. This bad writing of my particular question that I have here. Which RAID type duplicates all information across multiple physical disks? An exact duplicate of it. RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5, RAID 6. Well, you can kind of tell statistically we had a lot more people. If I had to phone a friend, we could see RAID 1 was probably, or I guess 50-50 is what we'd be doing if I was really doing this right. 50-50, we'd see RAID 1 was 41, and that would be correct. RAID 1 is that mirroring of information across disks, an exact duplicate from one to the other. And some folks said RAID 0. Why wouldn't RAID 0 apply there? And some people said RAID 5. Some people said RAID 6, which you're sort of correct with RAID 6. You're one person with RAID 6. No, you aren't. No, there's not exact duplicate there either, is it? So not RAID 6, not RAID 5, not RAID 0. Interestingly enough, RAID 6 is not in the CompTIA exam requirements document. But I read something this week that might be something you might want to read up on. I don't know. We'll see how that works. So which one is this really? What is the answer to this exactly with these two things? I think we should probably drill down more into that, because I got a question this week that asked, what are the types of RAID and the differences between all of those? I think that's a good question. What are those different types? It is a common question. And I was trying to think about, as I was putting this together, why is this such a common question that I get every month? And I think it's because it's not something we commonly do. If you have a laptop, if you have a desktop, if you do gaming, if you do video editing, if you browse the net, you don't set up a RAID array, this redundant array of independent disks. You don't really set that up. That's not something you commonly do. So it's one of those things where it's foreign to us, so we want to know more. So I don't have this picture in my videos, but it's probably something I should add, because I like to visualize And if I had a picture, it really helps me. So this is what a common RAID array would look like. If you were in an enterprise, it would probably be something like this big device that's got just a ton of drives on the front of it. I've gone into data centers that have racks and racks. These are 18-inch racks. They're up 7 feet, 8 feet high. There are rows and rows of them. A lot going on with that piece. And it's nothing but devices like this one that have spinning disks inside of them. There are SSD RAIDs that run as well, but most of the time these are spinning disks all sitting there and the lights are flashing as it goes by. Now in my studio, right behind my desk, can't even see it, but it's back there, up back behind everything is one of these RAID arrays, this Synology device. It's a 1512 Plus that I have. And I have 5 3 terabyte drives. I bought 3 terabyte drives, 5 of them, and I slid them into those devices, or slid them right into these bays. And this device is, you can tell it how you want to configure it. Do I want to just have them set up and share? I have 3 terabyte drives. There's 5 of them. That's 15 terabytes. This would look like a 15 terabyte volume. But that's not what I want to do. I want to set up RAID. I want this configured in a way that if any one of those disks failed, that I would have redundancy. And there are types of RAID that don't provide redundancy, but in my case, I need that redundancy. I want that type of thing to be able to do that. And the reason is because of how RAID works. RAID is this redundant array of independent disks. It's kind of got a bad name because there is a RAID 0, and I guess we can think about it this way. RAID 0 means zero redundancy. Nada, nothing, no redundancy there whatsoever. What's really happening is it's splitting the file and putting part of the file on one disk and part of the file on the other disk and part of the file on one disk. So it's really taking the file, breaking it apart and spreading it across multiple disks. Well, that sounds like an awful problem if you lose a disk, and it would be, but it's really designed for speed. Writing to a single slow hard drive, if I can take that and split it across multiple drives, I can effectively write twice as fast and perhaps even read almost twice as fast from those. That's at least the idea behind it, is that I can speed things up, but obviously no redundancy there. If you lose a disk, you lose your data. So an important consideration here is that a RAID array does not replace your backups. And here we go. I'm gonna come down here. Because under my desk, I have more disks that aren't in the array. And I will, this is one that's ready to go off site. So I'll take my entire course as I'm building the course, it's written to the array and it's backed up and it's sent off site. And then I'll back it up and have one on the local site as well. So RAID does not replace, even the redundant RAID does not replace your backups, because you're writing to them right now. What if you really were going to that disk and you overwrote a file? Well, it's redundantly overwritten, but you can't go backwards without some other type of a mechanism in place to be able to go back in a versioning method. So one important consideration with RAID 0, I'm doing this between these two different devices. I need at least 2 to do RAID 0, but I could have more than 2 to have RAID 0 in there. So that's pretty useful to have that. Now RAID 1, mirroring. I mentioned the ability to have the duplicate information across drives, and that's exactly what this does. I probably should have written my question a little bit better, but that's exactly where I was going with this. Which RAID duplicates that information, makes an exact copy of it, and it's RAID 1. And we call that mirroring, but it is a duplicate of that between the two. Now it's using every bit of disk space to do this on both drives. So if you have a 3 terabyte drive, you need another 3 terabyte drive to go there right next to it. That's your RAID array. The total amount of disk space available is 3 terabytes to you. Even though you have bought and purchased and installed 6 terabytes, you're duplicating. You have an exact copy from one to the other. Today on the Professor Messer website, this is what I'm using, is RAID 1 mirroring to be able to do that. Now I'm changing to a new hosting provider, maybe tomorrow morning, to move it over. I'm going to use some different methods to be able to maintain availability and uptime and redundancy and backups But this is what I'm using as we talk right now, as you're on the Professor Messer website. So if I lose a disk, you're still running. You can still access the website. You can still get to videos. You can still get to this live stream. You can still do everything you would expect to do with that. If you lose that drive, then you're good. Now, you still have to take the bad drive out and put a new one in. If you lost one after that, of course, you would be in trouble. And of course, you need at least 2 drives here as well to duplicate it. If you wanted to be able to have a second drive in here, I need to duplicate that. That would be 4 drives. So we have to keep building every time we add new physical drives to this, because we are duplicating and mirroring that information. RAID 5 is kind of an interesting one. With RAID 1, we were mirroring information, but that used up a lot of disk space, didn't it? It had a lot that I was using. I was duplicating the information. What if I could lose a drive, still keep running, but not lose so much disk space? That would be ideal. And in fact, many enterprises use RAID 5 to be able to do that. The way RAID 5 works is that it writes blocks of information, takes your file and splits it across drives. And on the last drive, or an extra drive in the array, it writes a bit of parity. Actually spreads the parity out against the different disks so that you have some redundancy there as well. But this parity is a comparison of the bits. It does what we call an XOR of those bits, and writes a parity piece to the side. The idea being that if I lose one of my physical disks, because I have a parity, it can reconstruct what was on the missing drive, and everybody continues to run. Very, very nice. The parity itself, you'll find, is very, very interesting, because now it's calculating if I lose a drive. There's extra work that has to be done when I lose a drive to be able to continue to get that information. That's why a lot of the storage controllers, if you look at a storage controller, some have their own CPU. They've got a lot of buffer memory inside of them. They're their own little computer, and that's why. They do a lot of calculations all the time to write the parity, and calculations to be able to recalculate the parity. And if you go back to one of my early study groups, you could probably Google or search on YouTube for the study group that has a parity. We go through how to calculate parity in a RAID array, which I find interesting. I may just do a separate video for that one. Obviously, you're now efficiently using your disk space. You don't have any worries about redundancy. If you lose a drive, you keep running. I need at least 3 disks to be able to do that. I wrote out 4 of them here, but you can, of course, keep adding disks and keep spreading that parity around. It's very nice. So if you lose a drive, you pop out the old drive, the bad drive, you put in the new one, and it recalculates and rebuilds the drive as it originally was, because it has that parity information. Really, really useful to have that there. Now, if you're taking your 700 series exam, you're good for RAID. You don't have to know anything else about RAID. If you're taking your 800 series exam, you have to know one more type. And that extra type is RAID 1+0. You may see it also referred to as RAID 10. This has a combination of RAID 1 and RAID 0. So we're combining those two things together. Here's how it works. So you have these different drives here. You can see block 1, block 2, and block 3. I am taking, just like RAID 0, and I am striping across these. But what I'm really doing, instead of striping to a single drive, I'm duplicating the drive. So I have RAID 1 where I'm duplicating, and I'm duplicating in those little groups, and then I stripe between all of them. It's almost like the best of both worlds. If you're trying to decide, I want RAID 0 for the speed, but I like RAID 1 for the mirroring. This is a nice combination of those two. Very, very useful if you need that combination of speed and of the redundancy. So very nice to be able to have that capability. In some cases, people who are using very specialized applications that need very fast access but also need redundancy may opt to use RAID 1+0 or RAID 10 to be able to do that. So if you're on your 800 series exam, you must know that. You need at least 4 drives to be able to do this, but you can, of course, add on more pairs of those things to keep them going as well with those pieces. So hopefully that's answered some of your questions this month for RAID. There was a lot of RAID questions that I got. So I thought we'd do another breakdown of RAID to be able to see those pieces on here. Well, every month I also go through and try to figure out these darn acronyms. We have pages of them at the back of the CompTIA A+ certification. So it would be good if I was able to, for instance, look at this month's acronym and understand exactly what type of information was associated with the word IRQ. What is an IRQ? This is something where don't answer in the chat room, but this is something that you can vote on at vot.rs and go to 176956 to be able to do that. 176956. Very quickly, I'm going to go back to the chat room. Folks were talking about RAID, and I had in my question RAID 6. And you notice I didn't talk about RAID 6 in that last explanation of RAID. RAID 6 is RAID 5 with extra parity drive. That is one that is not listed in the CompTIA exam requirements. Just because it's not listed in the exam requirements doesn't mean you won't necessarily be asked about it. They say in the exam requirements, here's the list, but we could ask you more stuff too. So make sure that you not only understand these things, but maybe you understand the technologies behind them and where they go. So there are quite a lot of acronyms here. Boy, people are starting to vote. Oh, I didn't mean to close it. There we go. We're going to hide this real quick as you guys go through and vote on the IRQ. Now, one of the things that we deal with IRQs, you may see some very old CompTIA exams where they expect you to memorize IRQs. And a lot of the tests that you take online, there are a number of sites where you can take free tests. Some of these tests have 15-year-old questions like that. IRQs are listed in the CompTIA exam requirements in the acronym section, but on the 800 series, I don't believe they're part of the listed out exam requirements anymore, interestingly enough. I want to say there is a section. Maybe it's in the section dealing with DMAs. We may look at that before we're done here, just to get a feel for that. So a lot of people voted. Let's see what the results are. 48 of you I fooled, not at all. Interrupt request is an IRQ, but wait, it's IRQ request. That's where that is. Not really an acronym, is it? It's one of those things that's a term that we use as an abbreviation that we capitalize, but yet it's not an acronym. I don't know. That's the way it goes sometimes. Incident review query, which I like. Maybe that's what it should be. Nope, not that. Intelligence request. I made these up. There's no such thing as any of these. So I would go through each one of them and explain the differences. These don't exist. I don't know. Maybe an intelligence request quotient does exist. It sounded good. Sounded like something I should know, but in fact, not really something. Now, the reason I put this in here is very quickly. I had someone ask the question. There's the answer to those. I should have probably shown that piece. There we go. 56 interrupt request. Lots of differences there. The reason I asked that is we got a question in the chat room yesterday. And of course, the chat room on professormesser.com is available to you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I try to stay in there and hang out as much as possible. But even if I'm not there, plenty of people are there to help answer questions. And the question that came in from RJ is, are RFQ problems really an issue today? Is this something we need to worry about? And the quick answer is not really. Now, this goes back to IRQs in general and how they work. And in the older ISA bus and earlier, the interrupt request is used, and it's pretty important, the IRQ that we're using. The IRQ is really designed for your hardware to get access to your system and say, hey, I've got something for you, computer. If I'm typing on my keyboard and I hit a button, the keyboard sends an IRQ message, an interrupt request that says, hey, CPU, memory, hey, everybody, I need to now do something. I need access to that CPU to be able to make that happen. And the CPU says, oh, didn't see you there. Thanks for interrupting. It's actually perfectly reasonable. It's not rude at all. And I'm now going to take your input from your keyboard. Your hard drive does the same thing. Your video output, everything inside of your computer is using these IRQs. Now, when you had the older buses like an ISA bus, the IRQs were specific to the hardware. So your serial port COM1 had an IRQ of 4. Your serial port COM2 had an IRQ of 3. Nothing else could use those. Now, you couldn't share those IRQs. If you tried and two devices started doing the same thing at the same time, you would have a problem with that device working properly. Your serial ports wouldn't work properly. The device that you had plugged in that had the same IRQ wouldn't work properly. And so you had to actually take the top off of your computer. There would be either jumpers or dip switches inside on the card. You would change the dip switches. You'd have to do an inventory of your whole computer. What interrupt is everything using? I have a network card. I have a video card. I have 2 serial ports. What's everybody using? What memory addresses are they using? Make sure nobody's overlapping with someone else. It was all manual. When we got the PCI bus and continuing on to where we are now, the PCI bus does a lot of these things for us using plug and play technology. So we always made fun of plug and play when it came out, but the reality is it was awesome. You put a card into a computer. There's no dip switches. There's no jumpers. You plug the card in, and the software driver that loads allows you to automatically, first it looks around, says, what IRQs can I use? What's available? I'm going to use that one. It automatically figures it out. That's great. I don't have to do anything. There's not going to be a conflict because these devices now are figuring it out for themselves. But what if there was a conflict? What if 2 devices on a PCI bus use the same IRQ? It's okay. We have these shared IRQs that these devices use. So you don't have to worry about making sure there's not a conflict between all of those things. So very, very useful. So in the chat room, if you're asking me, so do I need to memorize these? Do I need to memorize these IRQs? No. Don't have to memorize those. Do I have to memorize the configuration of those? No, you need to know what they are, and you need to know how to look at them. So you might want to go into MS Info 32, your system configuration screen. That will show you IRQs. You can go into Device Manager and drill down into specific hardware, and it will show you IRQ settings. Those things are still useful to know. But these days, you rarely, if ever, need to go in and change or modify or update IRQ information, which is why that's one of the things that's no longer on the exam. I hear people say all the time, that A+, it asks you for such old stuff. No, it doesn't. It asks you for exactly what you need to know right now to do your job in an enterprise. And a good example is as we don't have IRQs, specific IRQs numbers asked of us any longer. We're not asked to memorize Windows 2000 any longer. That's extremely useful to have that capability there. So IRQs, nope, don't have to worry about that piece at all. I think that's one of the things when I start working with the certification exams, whether it's CompTIA or really anybody else, that becomes a pretty important piece for me because I have to find this information. In some cases, I have to remember this information. And IRQs was one of those things that once you memorize it, once you know it, it's kind of in your head. You're kind of stuck with it. It's going to be there forever. And that's why I was able to say, yeah, COM1, that's an IRQ 4. I wasn't making that up. That actually is correct. You run into those things all the time where something might seem like it's you don't use it anymore, and yet there it is, stuck in your head, ready to go. Well, one thing that I always get asked about now that they are performance-based questions, and we're going to talk more about performance-based questions. I realize we're coming up to the top of the hour. I got a lot more. So if you have to drop off, I understand. It's recorded. It'll be on the website. You can always go back to the replay. I'm going to keep going because the question that came in from BB this month was, are there any CompTIA A+ lab workbooks around? Now, I get this question a lot now that they are performance-based questions because when you sit down for your A+ exam for the first time, you're going to be asked some questions where you have to do something. It's not a multiple choice. It's not a fill in the blank. You're going to be asked something very specific about how to perform a function. They are performance-based. So you will be asked how to do something in the operating system, and they'll pop up a screen and you'll be asked to do it. So one of the things that when we saw this coming, and this has really been coming for about a year now, the folks that I work with, the partners of mine, GTS Learning, who a great bunch of people that have always had great courseware for A+. They have their online freestyle program for A+, and Network Plus, and Security Plus, and many other things. They sat down and said, we need something that doesn't just give you a bunch of labs on a screen. It's not one where you have to type and just go through a list of things. We really need to do it. But here's your challenge, of course. The A+ exam, you have to know Windows XP, Windows Vista, Windows 7. Not Windows 8 yet, but you have to know those operating systems. Now, not a lot of us have Windows XP, Windows Vista, and Windows 7. And if we had all of those, we'd have to load them up into maybe, a virtual machine, maybe dual boot our computers, maybe somehow make sure we have memory and disk space. Disk space will be enormous for having all of these different operating systems on here. It's a lot of resources to deal with. And if you have a basic machine, that's really something outside the scope of what you're able to do. So hopefully you can read a book and get through it. Well, when we started seeing this come through, one of the things that I wanted to work with GTS with is how can we make these things available in more of a virtual lab. That's exactly what we have here. These are the GTS Learning Practice Labs, where they have all of their labs already available. In fact, I'm going to back up here real quick. Let's go back to this. These are labs and modules set up introducing Windows 7. I have system administration, user account management, disk management, file management, all of the things that you're expected to do on your 802, and some of these on your 801 exam as well. And you can go through this list. There's a bunch here. Look at all these labs they have. Let's go down to maybe Event Viewer. Here's a good one where I need to introduction, reviewing the Event Viewer, and summary. And when I click Event Viewer, it takes me to a lab that's on the screen. And it says, in this lab is just a single device. If I was doing one that was operating systems, it would have many devices available for me. I would work on the lab. Let's start the lab. I'll go to number 1. And it starts the lab. Here's what you need to do. And you can even get information on how to run some of these things yourself, how to get it running on your screen, what you would need to click on, go into your virtual device, and then start working with it. Well, the virtual device is right here. There's my Windows device right here. I'm not running this Windows device on my computer. I'm running it with, and this is nice, I just tried this last night. There's both a Java client for this. Some people don't like running Java in their browser. There's an HTML5 client for this as well. So if you're in Chrome, for instance, Chrome does not have a 64-bit version of Java that you can run in Mac OS X. But you might want to be able to do this. You run the HTML5 version. Very, very useful to have that there. And now you've got full run of this device. This is just like running a normal Windows machine. It's a remote desktop right into this. I can go in and modify and change and delete and add, or I can simply step through all of the things it asked me to do for this one. This one's Event Viewer. Maybe now I go into my my control panel. I go to my administrator pieces. I start working with the Event Viewer. I now get into the details of this lab, and I've got an operating system right here. I didn't have to load anything on my computer. I didn't have to do anything. The folks at GTS Learning make this so easy to use. And as I always say, when I'm talking to the folks at GTS Learning, I say, yes, well, there's your price. These are my students. I want a better price for what you're doing. So they're nice enough to also give us a break on the price. So if you go to professormesser.com/freestyle labs, it should take you to the proper link there. And you'll notice on that page, they've marked it down from $159 to $99. And that's at professormesser.com/freestyle labs. I think I got that right on that piece. Let me try it myself. See if that is. Professormesser.com how do you spell Messer again? Freestyle Labs. Let's see if it redirects where it should. And in fact, it takes you to exactly that page. And on that page, I'll show you why am I not showing this to you? There we go. And on that page, on the Freestyle Labs page right here is the Live Labs bundles. So you can choose that. In fact, they've got a $225 price that they've put their freestyle online learning plus the practice labs. So you get the labs, you get the online book, you get the online sample tests to go through. You get everything with that $99. So not just the labs, you get their entire training course. In fact, inside of their book online, they have embedded my video. So as you're reading about Event Viewer in the book, here's my video on Event Viewer, and then you can pop out to the labs and actually do the labs on Event Viewer, all set up on professormesser.com/freestyle labs. And I want to thank the folks at GTS Learning. They have been fantastic at making these resources available for us. So if you're someone who needs that lab functionality, it's something that might help you get through those performance-based questions. I've used it myself. It's a viable and very, very useful tool to be able to go into anytime I want on any system I have. So professormesser.com/freestyle labs. Let's now get into another part of the study group. People ask me quite a bit for this to be able to answer questions about the exam itself and what I think about these things. So some of the questions that came in fact, I think this month I had more questions about the exam than I had questions about topics on the exam. So there's a lot of confusion right now for performance-based questions. And there's a 700 series and there's an 800 series and there's so much going on. So one of the questions I got around the exam was, read the book last year. I found your videos. So how should I study this? What's the best way to go about doing this? And I got a number of questions that talked about how do I really go through the study process for this? And I don't have an answer that works for everybody. Everybody studies a little bit differently. But I think one of the best things you can do is have the right resources available. Obviously, I created these videos to be absolutely free and available to anybody in the world who would like to watch them. The entire course done with all of this equipment in this room. We've set it up so that you can access all these videos that I make, that I put online, absolutely free. Credit every minute of every video. So grab the videos and have a look at those. Some people get some additional videos to go along with it. That's fine too. Mine will still be there and waiting for you. Get a good book. And maybe it's the GTS Learning book that we just talked about, their online freestyle book. They also have physical books that are available on that link at professormesser.com/freestyle labs. Maybe it's maybe you go out to Amazon or to your local bookstore and you get a good A+ book, but I highly recommend you get a book to go along with videos. It's a different format. The information gets into your brain differently. And quite honestly, you're able to put different information on a printed page than what I can provide to you in video. There are differences in those media, and you will learn differently between both of those. I also recommend a good Q&A, a good sample exam. Freestyle Labs has a good sample exam. A lot of the books you buy have very good sample exams. I like the Exam Cram books. There's a series called Exam Cram, and it has sample tests. And they not only tell you what the answer is to those questions, there's another part of the book where they go into detail explaining why the answer is there and why the other answers weren't correct. So I think those three combinations are really good. And for performance-based questions, we need to do some hands-on. Maybe it's a virtual lab like we just saw. Maybe it's something you're doing on your computer itself, but you need to understand how to do a trace route, how to do a ping, how to find the event log, how to go through the event viewer and look at that information. Very, very useful to have that there. And I think that's an important thing to consider when you're putting together all of your study materials for A+. Along those same lines, people like to ask, how long does it normally take to complete your A+ exam? Really different for everybody, it seems. It's one of those things that it not only is different for everybody. You saw at the beginning, we had people that just started. We had people been doing this more than a year. When I first sat down to take my A+, I was already in the industry 15 years. I had already taken my Security Plus and my Network Plus. I did it backwards. I started with Security Plus because I was in a security role. I did Network Plus because it's always good to know networking. And then I thought, well, I'll do this. I want to make videos, but I thought if I'm going to do a course on A+, might be a good idea to have an A+ certification. Let's take it. So I sat down with my books, and I had already done lower level help desk, tear apart computers, put in these adapter cards, move things around, reimage devices, administer Windows. I've done that in my previous life. And I started looking at the A+ exam and said, this stuff is broad. It may not go deep into making very specific registry changes, but I had to know what the registry was. I had to know what the parts were. How do I back it up? How do I restore it? I had to know all of these different things about the operating systems that I never thought to learn before. And in fact, become very useful when somebody says, hey, I got this laptop and it has this processor, has this much memory, has this much hard drive space on it. Can I upgrade Windows? We never think that when we're memorizing these details, that that's how we're going to use those details. So I sat down. It took me 6 weeks to go through 2 separate books, and then I took the exam. So it was even me. It's taking a month and a half. I say even me, but sometimes I'm not as smart when going through these things. And life happens around you. You still have to go to work. You still have things to do at home. I got the wife. I got the kids. I got the dogs. I got the horse. There's painting to do. The car needs to be washed. There's a normal life outside of the studio. Those things have to happen as well. So it could take a number of months to get everything you need. Maybe you take a course at a community college or a technical college that takes you through the A+, because maybe you work best in a room with a lot of different people to be able to ask questions and interact. And they've got a computer there and I can take it apart and I can put it back together. So it's going to be different for everyone. But I would think most people, it's probably about a 3-month. If you're really sitting down and cramming on it and you have, I would say, an average knowledge of computers, you're kind of just getting into it, because that's what we really see with the A+. About a 3 months is good if you really apply yourself every day and you start working towards this thing. When you can take a sample exam, and on the sample exams, you're getting about 85-90% correct on your sample exam, I think you're probably about ready to take the test. So make sure that you know how to make that part work for you. So a question that comes up quite a bit is, do you need to take the 220-801 and the 220-802 within a certain amount of time? So do you take one and then is the clock ticking? Do I have to take it quickly? Can I take it a year later? How long can I go between those things? That becomes an interesting question. The reality is, for A+, as long as the exam is still offered, you can take them with as much time in between as you would like, or as little time in between as you would like. The challenge you're going to have is when a test retires. So this is a good example. Let's look at the 700 series. Let's say that a year ago, you took the 220-701 and you passed it. Something happened. You moved, got a new job, things happen in life. You just never got around to taking the 702. Well, the 702 expires on August 31st of 2013. If you don't take the 702 before then, the exam will retire and you will not have the opportunity to take it, and therefore you will not have the opportunity to get an A+ based on that 701 you took. You would have to start everything over with the 801, 802. But 3 years ago, when the 701 came out, you could have taken it and passed it. You could wait until August 31st to take that 702 and pass it, and you'd be A+ certified. So there's no time you have to wait between those things. There's no real timeout. There's no clock ticking. You don't have to worry that that's going to happen. You'll be fine with that piece. Don't worry that somehow you'll run out of time. You won't have the ability anymore to take the exam. No, they don't time you out. The only time that you really have to wait between exams is if you fail an exam. There is a separate, if you fail an exam one time, you can take it right away. If you fail it twice, you have to wait a certain amount of time. You fail it a third time, you have to wait even longer. So make sure you look at, for the exam you're interested in taking, make sure you look at what the failure retake policy is for CompTIA. Maybe we can find that real quick. CompTIA retake policy. I don't have my regular browser up, but I think we can find what we're looking for. So if I Google CompTIA retake policy, here we go, flip over to this. The retake policy says, in the event if you fail your first attempt to pass any CompTIA certification, there's no waiting period between the first and second attempt. However, before your third attempt or any subsequent attempt to pass, you shall be required to wait for a period of at least 14 calendar days from the date of your last attempt to pass such examination. I'm glad they put the 14 in parentheses because I had no idea that's what 14 was. Why do they do that? Lawyers in the room, you can send me a note. That'd be great. It seems redundant and pointless and just a way to get more hourly billings. So there's your retake policy, and you've got different things. Notice that the beta examinations you can only take one time. Sometimes CompTIA will do that. They'll send you a note that says, hey, we're planning to come out with a new exam. If you go to Exam Place, we're going to give you the beta. You have to take every question in the pool. And you could, if you pass, you actually get that certification when it's available. It's kind of nice. So some nice things to be available for you there as well. Here's one. I thought this was somebody who is driven. They asked, should I book my test date before I start preparing for the exam? Like, this person is ready. They are going to take this exam and they're going to pass it. I'm just going to book it now and maybe then study some. And I see where you're coming from with that. If you look at if you're someone who's taken these exams before and you look at booking the exam and you make a date to book the exam, it's on right then. You notice how it changes how you study? Like, okay, I got 2 weeks. Here we go. You're kind of pumped up, ready to go with this. I think that's where they were going with that piece. Generally speaking, I don't recommend doing that. I don't recommend that you book your test date before you start preparing for the exam. I think I said earlier, get an 85, 90% on your sample tests that you're taking. On the ones you take out of books, maybe the freestyle labs, maybe some that you get an exam cram. Get about an 85, 90%. Get where you're really comfortable with these questions and how they're being tested. Those types of things. Those pieces become pretty important because then you can feel comfortable that now you can book your test date. In my particular area, I could go out and do the test on the next business day. There's not a huge number of people trying to get seats to go to that just because of where I happen to live. But if you're in a large area or an area where people are taking a lot of exams, you might want to book that pretty quickly. You might want to get that in place. See, get the right thing brought up here on the screen. You might want to get already booked 2 weeks ahead of time, just so that you don't run into a situation where I'm ready to take the exam. Now I have to wait 3 weeks. Now I have to wait 4 weeks. Some people run into real problems there with that. So I wouldn't say book your test before you start preparing. I'd say prepare, get comfortable, and as soon as you hit that point where you've either gone through your sample tests or you've gone through the CompTIA exam requirements and use that as a checklist, maybe that is when you should actually book it. Because you're right, it does change the way you think about those pieces. Another question that came through, I'm doing my A+ on Wednesday, the 3rd of July. This came in this week. Like, next week, you're going to be on it. You're going to be taking your exam. What's the most important thing that I need to know? This is not a multiple choice question. This is not a fill in the blank for you that are watching, because there is no one most important thing to know. I think the most important thing to know is for you to go out to the CompTIA website and download the exam objectives. Let's see if we can do this in our browser. I'm going to go out to CompTIA.org. And I'm mentioning this for a very specific reason. We need to download and get our hands on those objectives. So if you were to go to the CompTIA website, here it is. It's a delightful website. I'm going to go to certifications. And when it takes you to the certification area, you've got an option here to get certified. You can choose all of these different certifications they have. You can look through all the fees and things you need to know. You can look at testimonials, testing, and training. In fact, if you go to the training and the testing, there is sample questions. There's a small little group. I think it's 20 different questions they have on there. And there is an option there for exam objectives. So on those exam objectives, I'm going to click that, and it takes you to a page where you simply, they've actually improved this page. Notice you only have to put your name in. Here's my name. I'm going to put in james@professormesser.com. What country am I in? I'm in the United States. My exam objectives, and I can pick which ones I want. I want the A+, so right there at the top, but you could choose others. If you also wanted the Network Plus and the Security Plus, you can do that as well. You can check all of them if you wanted to. because you're that kind of person. You're ready to take some exams. And these aren't required, but you can say, I'm just looking for information. I'm going to take my exam in more than 6 months. I want to do it because of a reason. And then you get exam objectives. Here are the exam objectives. For the 801, 701 has a lot of different languages associated with it. You can see all those languages that are there. But here's the ones right at the top. CompTIA 220 801. It's that easy. Go get the objectives. Go get your hands on those. I'm going to click on the 220 801. Here it is because I'm using Chrome. It pops it right up in my browser. And here's the exam objectives that tell you exactly how much of what information is covered on the exam. It tells you, by the way, right here, the lists of examples provided in bulleted format below each objective are not an exhaustive list. I think I told you that earlier. So it's actually pretty darn exhaustive. I'm not sure why I think what they're trying to say is they can ask you other things, but the list itself is big. There are a lot of things on this list. Configure and apply BIOS settings, install firmware upgrades, flash BIOS, BIOS component information, RAM, hard drive, optical drive, CPU, BIOS configurations. There's pages and pages and pages and pages of this. It goes on and on. 22 pages. Watch it go by. We're just to section 2. We're on page 7. We just hit the second domain of networking. Yeah, try making videos. You're like, is section 1 ever going to end? And the answer was no, it wasn't. And finally, we're down to section 4 and 5. We've gone through now a total of 12 pages. So the other 10 pages in here are acronyms. So we now need to know what these things mean as well. They give you an amazing amount of information on here to be able to go through these pieces. Make sure you download them and read them. If you're asking me if a topic is on the exam, you're doing it backwards. You should be able to go out, download the objectives. You should know exactly what's on the exam. And I mention this because it's a great checklist. You want to know exactly when you should be going and taking this exam. Go to your checklist, go to your objective list, configure and apply BIOS settings. Do I know how to install firmware upgrades, i.e. flash the BIOS? Yes or no? Yes, I'll check mark. If I go, I don't know. I don't quite remember that one. Let's mark that one to come back to. Do I understand how to look at component information in the BIOS, like RAM, hard drive, optical drive, and CPU? Yeah, I think I do. I'll check that one off. Let's go to the next one. So when you can check about 90% of this, you're probably ready to take your exam. So good example of how you can work a little bit better with what CompTIA gives you. And CompTIA is pretty unique. Other organizations don't give you this level of detail. So take advantage of that. Another common question: to gain successful employment, can certification in CompTIA's A+ and Network Plus be used in lieu of a degree? It is someone from France. We are doing it in lieu of a degree. MG asks, it's good as a degree, right? No, it is not. This is a certification is part of a well-balanced breakfast, a well-balanced education. You still need formal education. You need experience. You need certifications. You need a good attitude. You need a good working demeanor. You need all these things put together to be the best possible candidate that you can be for a position that you might be applying for. A certification exam does not take the place. It does not replace any type of formal education, especially a 2-year or a 4-year degree. No way does it even come close to that. So just think about when you are putting together your strategy for being the best possible candidate. Don't think that a certification is now going to put you at the same level as someone who's a 4-year degree. All these things work together. You want to be as strong as you can walking in the door for your interview. So you may want to have that 4-year degree so that when you're competing against other people, they're also going to be fighting with that 4-year degree. Yes, but you have certifications and you have experience and you have projects that you've worked on before, and you have people who have signed documents that you can give to someone who says, you should absolutely hire this person. I recommend them highly. Those are extremely useful to be able to walk in, but don't think that any one of those things replaces the other. They all stand on themselves. They all have value, but they have a very different value depending on what you're looking at. So keep that in mind as well, that we're not going to be replacing a degree with a certification. That would be easy. 6 months, take certification, same as a degree? No, alas, it does not. Not so much. Another question, and this is a question more of one for you guys, which says, has Windows 8 been added to the exam yet? Well, I happen to already be on the CompTIA website where I can download the objectives. Again, this is one of those objectives questions that I normally wouldn't answer because it's in the objectives. And the objectives themselves say Windows XP Home, Windows XP Professional, Windows XP Media Center, Windows XP 64-bit Professional, Windows Vista Home Basic, Windows Vista Home Premium, Windows Vista Business, Windows 7 Starter, blah, 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 Windows 7 Enterprise, Windows 7, Windows 7, Windows 7. No Windows 8 on there. So the answer to that question is a no, but that's not why I put the question up here. So some of you that go back just over 3 years to the 700 series exam, the 700 series exam was released and it required that you know Windows 2000 and Windows XP. A year later, they modified the exam requirements and added Windows 7. They also added IPv6. They also added some security things. They added more stuff. And they didn't change the number of the exam. I found out about it because one of you sent me an email and said, hey, I thought you said Windows 7 wasn't on this thing. It's written right here in the exam requirements. I said, what? What are you talking about? It's a 701, 702. It doesn't have... Yeah, it does have Windows 7. It's right there. They changed it. What else did they change? Had to go through the whole thing. What else did they change? Had to add more videos. Had to add IPv6. Had to add more security stuff. Had to add those pieces. So the question, thank you, chat room, for repeating this. Has Windows 8 been added to the exam yet? You're now asking yourselves, is it on there? The thing is, they might add it. They might slipstream it into the exam and not tell anybody, just like they did with the 700 series. I hope they don't. It was a bad idea. It probably was easy for them because they didn't have to change any of their paperwork. They didn't have to change any numbers. It was great. It was a pain for us because we didn't know it happened and we were suddenly in the middle of it. And now there were updates, and CompTIA didn't make it clear that a lot more things other than Windows 7 was added. So even today, people say Windows 7 isn't on the 700 series. Absolutely, it's on the 700 series. Absolutely is. So it's also on the 800 series too. So the answer to this question is Windows 8 is not on the exam yet. But, you know, tomorrow it might be. If you see it in the exam objectives, tell me, because maybe I don't know. Now, if it's been out for a while and you're watching this as a replay, you probably don't have to tell me anymore. I'm probably good. You can go to my website and see that I probably have Windows 8 videos available for you. But just keep in mind that that sometimes does happen. So, important consideration, something to keep in mind. Very important if you're studying for your certification. So, every month I like to give you a link of the moment. And we've already talked this session about performance-based exams, performance-based exams, and performance-based exams. There's all these performance-based exams. What the heck do those look like? Well, there is a video called the Candidate Experience, I think. It's done by a third-party partner to CompTIA, and you'll find it at bit.ly/exam link, at bit.ly exam link. I'm going to type it in myself. Turn the volume on.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for taking time out of your day to watch this short video.
You're welcome.
CompTIA has received questions from candidates asking, what are your exams like? How much time do I have to complete the exam?
That's a good question.
Or, what type of questions should I expect when taking an exam?
I have the same.
And the list goes on.
Yes, it does. So this is a video that goes through the candidate experience all the way from the point where you are sitting down to take the exam. Here's what you see on the screen. Here's the information available, but perhaps better, they not only take you through multiple choice questions associated with it. Here you have to fill out the candidate agreement, put your name in, but they also take you through simulations of the performance-based questions. Some are command line based. Some are based on matching, like this. Some are based on working with a switch and plugging things in, and where do I put things? You know, what is this? They give you a very good example of some of the things that you're expected to do for some of these performance-based questions. A really good video to watch for this. It's a 15, almost 16-minute video. That's a good video. And look, I can, at the bottom of that, I understand they must know it's me watching. They say I have a revolutionary transplant. I'm not going to change this. Are you kidding me? I'm not changing this. I'm just trying to learn about my exam. So I love this video because it really does take you through the experience on what you would expect to see for that. I think that in this particular piece, we're looking at the exam. It's good to have a feel. If you've never sat down for one of these exams before, it's good to have a feel for this. I took a certification exam this week. I took a beta exam. It's not a CompTIA exam. It wasn't even a Pearson VUE, so it was a different testing center. But it's interesting to see how those things work. And it's the same experience whether you go to a Pearson or whether you go to one of these other third parties that I did. It was one that was similar to what I saw in this video. It was almost exactly what I saw in this video. I didn't have performance based on mine, but boy, that was a great thing to be able to see this before I got there. I think a lot of the stress when you're taking the exam is it's the fear of the unknown. But if you know exactly what the screens are going to look like, you know what the multiple choice questions are going to look like, you know what some of the performance-based questions might look like. Okay, now I'm feeling better. I would highly recommend that if you are at all interested in performance-based, I think a lot of what you learn, you'll be fine on the performance-based, but there are some people that have written exam experiences where they're not telling you what the performance-based questions are, but they're telling you need to understand these technologies when you go in for your exam. Those things they kind of get around some of those requirements with some of those things that you'll find with the exam agreement, because you can't tell people what's on the exam. But the exam agreement restricts you. But they won't give you specifics. They'll just say, make sure you know this type of technology. So there's some things out there that you can really, really get to help with that piece. Okay, some announcements. Now that we've gone an hour and a half in this session, you can always follow me on Twitter. I'm always putting my daily pop quiz, plus some other things from time to time, some pictures and things that I find around the web on there on ProfessorMesser.com/Twitter. Highly recommend you subscribe on the ProfessorMesser.com/YouTube. My friends at GTS Learning have been great. Make sure if you are looking for labs, they have some free ones. You don't have to buy that $99 package. Maybe just try the free ones. Try it out. See if it's for you. You can find that at ProfessorMesser.com/freestyle labs. And of course, I try to do these every month. And now we're back on schedule. I've got an A+. Maybe we'll do a Network Plus very soon. But you can always find out the latest ones at ProfessorMesser.com/calendar. And you'll be able to see everything that we do on that piece. And of course, thanks to you. Without your questions, without your feedback, without the folks that are in the live chat, without all of these things that are going on, we would not be able to have these live streams. So thank you to you. And this is something that, of course, we're going to keep doing. We're not done with this, and we're going to do even more live events into the future. There's a lot going on here at Professor Messer and things that we want to bring to you. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Professor Messer A+ Study Group.